Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are now joined by Ian Parkinson. He is the sheriff for San Luis Obispo County. And sir, in this beautiful county, we so often forget that we need to remain prepared. We see the beautiful mountains, the beautiful coast. We remember what happened in Japan, another beautiful country. They faced a significant earthquake, a tsunami. The Fukushima plant went down. We have our own nuclear plant here in San Luis County. So you're looking to make this county the most prepared county of all 58 counties in our great state.
And beyond.
And beyond.
And
Perfect.
beyond.
Talk to us about that. Why?
So, well, the whole issue came up, the grand jury a couple of years ago when
Yes.
they were doing their examination of response to Diablo Canyon. One of the things they mentioned is the kind of response of volunteers, which, as you know from the prior disasters on the East Coast, the tsunamis and such,
Right.
that it was a big problem. Managing
Right.
volunteers is a whole new,
Sure.
whole new issue. So our plan was put together a task force. PG&E stepped up
Right.
and provided a
Who
$75,000.
owns, of course, Diablo Canyon.
Correct, and gave the money to my Sheriff's Foundation
Right.
in order to deal with volunteers.
And so what you have done is you've produced, if I may say, a very effective PSA, and I'm a pretty hard judge. It was very well done. You collected the 7 mayors from San Luis County. Why don't we take a look at the PSA and we'll come back in a moment.
San Luis Obispo County is a safe place to live, work, and play.
But disaster could strike at any time.
With your help, we could become the most
prepared county in the nation
You'll soon see and hear public service announcements.
that will help protect you, your family, your friends.
your co-workers, your neighbors, and your community.
So pay attention. Your life and those of your loved ones could depend on it.
So, Sheriff, this PSA is the first of, I believe, 6. What will the other ones be highlighting?
We'll be covering reverse 911, we'll be covering shelter in place, we'll be covering the use of 211, which is one of the things we're supporting.
What is 211? I don't know 211.
Well, 211 really is an information line, and we plan to utilize it in emergencies for people to be able to call to get updated information rather than call 911 or a regular police line and kind of inundate the lines.
Sure. You mentioned, and there's a few more, we'll put it on the screen. You mentioned volunteers. How can we get involved in being a support for our community should there be a disaster, be it on the Central Coast or anywhere in our great state?
Well, we have a couple of programs locally, and one is what's called Slow VOAD, which is really the organizer of volunteers in a spontaneous event. And so they're active and alive, and we are supporting them. And the second is CERT, which is Community Emergency
Right.
Response Team. And we have several CERT teams in the county, but what we're trying to do, working with the fire chiefs, is organize those teams under kind of one umbrella, but independent. And that way, when we have an event, we can call different teams to different areas. So we're supporting them with their trailer, their equipment, and then the organization ultimately. So when we have something happen, we can utilize their services in a very organized, responsive way.
And at the same time, we as individual people, as individual families, need to take personal responsibility to be prepared. I recently bought one of those emergency preparedness kits. It's just sitting in a closet. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't have one all these years.
Yes. Well, you're absolutely right. And we encourage people to go through the CERT training class. They don't have to be on a CERT team, but it teaches them exactly what you were just talking about. How to put together a kit, what to do in an emergency. And so it's great individual training for people that are even not necessarily interested in being on a team.
And if you have children, preteens, teens,
Absolutely.
you want to make sure that they have a sense of what to do, where to go, because that can be one of the scariest moments when you realize you don't know where that child is.
Yes, no, absolutely. That's the best we can do.
Right.
is
When we
prepare.
come back, I want to continue our conversation, talk about prison realignment, a very significant issue in California. For our viewers on HLN, thank you so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So realignment, a huge issue in the state of California. Some have called it a bona fide crisis. I am fascinated by what's happened with the federal court. As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that our prisons were unconstitutionally being operated. They ordered that the prisons contract. But over the last few months, the federal court in California has given the state some extensions with which to allow them to figure out how best to deal with the overcrowding crisis. Were you surprised by these extensions?
No, because I think I felt like the county or the state and
Right.
Governor Brown is taking steps positively. and moving forward.
There's no doubt, if you look at the figures, when the court ruled that the prisons were being operated in an unconstitutional fashion, the prisons were at over 80% capacity. You know, in the last few months, it's under over 50% of capacity. Still a problem,
right?
But definitely positive progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to us about your county specifically. How is the prison crisis impacting your county, San Luis Obispo County? There is a prison in this county, but there's also a jail in this county.
Right.
And so how is it working here?
Well, I think it starts first with your attitude and how you focus on this. And it's easy to say this is a state problem, yet we're sending our inmates to state prisons, so it's our problem as well. So I think it starts with acceptance of a problem and acceptance of looking for a solution. So the way I look at realignment, quite frankly, is that the money that we're receiving back is being used to help try to change behaviors. Money that we would not have had if we had not had realignment.
Right.
So we're working on programs within the jail that are actually focused on changing that behavior.
We know there have been discussions about a potential need for prison construction. Is it time to start building out more prisons? And when I say prisons, I mean state prisons, not county jails. I know San Luis County, for example, has its own jail construction project. At the same time, there are some counties that are not engaged, one could argue, in tactics to decrease the pressure they're feeling from realignment. Some counties are still incarcerating those in the pretrial phase. Some counties are not using electronic monitoring. What is San Luis County doing?
Well, we are doing electronic monitoring. We have been doing electronic monitoring, and so I think we were ahead of it in that area. I don't know that we've gotten there yet with split sentencing and pretrial stuff. Was in most county jails, 40 to 60% of your inmates are, pre-sentenced inmates.
Right.
So dealing with that population is what we're really focusing on right now.
Is it time to look at whether those pretrial, pre-sentence should be serving their time prior to trial in their homes, monitored?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of candidates that just can't afford the bail, and that's why they're in custody. And it's not because they're violent or
But that
dangerous.
begs the question, though. I mean, if you're having to release folks early, I use that term very gingerly, but if you're having to release folks because you have these pretrial folks coming in, would it not behoove you to have the pretrial folks who haven't been convicted of a crime yet serving time at home as they await?
Absolutely. I agree with you. We have to do something. You mentioned that should we build more prisons?
Right.
Somewhere we're going to have to pick that balance, and locally, the jail level, we've got to pick that balance as well. What do we really want in our jails? People that really need to be in jail, and that the people that are coming in have not been convicted or are not violent, and we can get them out of custody to make room for the people that really need to be in there.
Right.
I think we absolutely have to do it.
So where do we stand on this question? San Luis, a smaller to medium-sized county, so not feeling the same pressures as these large urban counties. But are you reaching a crisis point, or have you been able to manage realignment more efficiently than some other counties?
Yeah,
tricky.
It's all relative to how many people
course.
you have. Of course, I can speak from my perspective is we're managing well. Are we crowded? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, my goal is to provide a humane, safe environment for inmates coming in. And I think we're doing that. And we're looking at alternatives. I think you have to be creative. I mean, you can't do it with just building new facilities. You've got to look at managing your population the best you can in the most effective and safe way to do it.
Do you see prison construction on the horizon? Prison construction, state prison construction?
I think we're going to have to see it. Now, maybe we go back into pre-realignment where they were talking about reentry facilities, and they were going to build one locally up in Paso at the old boys' school. And they abandoned that idea when realignment came along, and now they're starting to look at that again and saying it's a way of controlling population and reintegrate those people back into society.
He is Ian Parkinson, Sheriff for San Luis County. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We're joined by Adam Hill. He's a supervisor in San Luis Obispo County. And sir, we recently celebrated, if I can use that term, the 50th anniversary of the War on Poverty. A lot of discussion about Lyndon Johnson's attempts to eradicate poverty. It's hard to deny that we haven't made some progress, especially in the South and in the Rust Belt. But it begs the question about where we stand today on the question of poverty, homelessness. What's your sense of where we are on this question of poverty and homelessness?
Well, you know, there has been progress in a lot of places, particularly I think with elderly folks.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that helped push that into public's attention was the number of older folks who were poor in the years when they could no longer work and had no medical insurance and had no Social Security, and that's
when the Medicare, Medicaid took off,
and that's helped a lot of other folks with some health care needs, some desperate things. But the truth is, you know, there's still an amazing number throughout the country of people who live in serious poverty. You know, as many as 50 million or more Americans in a country that is quite wealthy and has quite a lot to do in terms of material goods and food and all those other things to help people.
And when you think about San Luis Obispo, you know, for better or for worse, Oprah Winfrey named San Luis Obispo was it the happiest city in North America, and so one would never expect that San Luis Obispo, paradise, would be facing a homelessness crisis. And I don't know, I mean, is it a crisis? Have we reached crisis, sir?
It's close to it, and part of it is because we lack the resources to properly address it. And so if that's the way to define a crisis, then we're there. I mean, we have a lot of people who are homeless in our community, a lot more, you know, it continues to increase.
And the question also is, did Oprah make it better or worse? Because all of a sudden, you know, word got out that San Luis Obispo was a wonderful place, and so people come to, you know, find their fortune, metaphorically speaking. And so, you know, was there an uptick as a result?
You know, the whole state of California is a magnet, and it's a magnet for obvious reasons such as the climate, and there are more services available than in other places. And so right now there are more homeless people in the state of California than all the 49 states combined.
Is that population, or is that even per capita?
That's population-wise. So, you know, there's more just flat-out numbers of homeless folks. And so everybody's struggling with it, you know, up and down the state. We talk to our colleagues in other places. It's not a new problem, of course, either. In our community, we, you know, we lack certain things that you need, such as low-income housing, a good supply of low-income housing. We lack enough of the mental health resources that are necessary, because really what's behind homelessness more than anything is mental health issues.
And that has become a hot-button issue as it relates to so many different factors facing our society. When you look at gun violence, when you look at educational achievement, when you look at homelessness, is the question of mental health.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing is, if you look at the 50-year anniversary of the War on Poverty, over the last 50 years, there's also been a massive dismantling and disinvestment in mental health care and in certain things that were in the past used to take care of people with mental illnesses, and that hasn't gotten a lot better. I remember
in the late 70s, early 80s, there was this idea that we should
closing down all the institutions, asylums,
as a way to provide power to these individuals, not, you know, as a way to allow them to live their lives. And now some folks feel as if that may have not been the best approach.
Well, you needed something better than you know, maybe than nothing. If you close down all the institutions, then what? I mean, you have a lot of people on the streets.
When we come back, I want to continue our conversation about homelessness, about poverty. For our viewers on HLN, I want to thank you so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back on Charter California Edition. So we do know that we want to empower people to live the life that they want to live.
Yes.
But when you look at the question of the homeless, you know, there's this notion of service resistant. So they may want to live a homeless life, but at a certain point, you know, we can't. I don't know. Can I say that? Can we allow that?
It's really the most critical question that a community has to ask, because there's a balance that you have to strike between compassion and helping people and also keeping your streets and your neighborhoods safe and clean. And you can't just allow homeless folks, because by virtue they're homeless, to do whatever they want to do. But at the same token, you need to provide services so these people can get help. What we've seen is that if you have really strong case management, you can get people into the kind of care that they need, into housing, and basically wrap services around them so they will be of no threat to themselves, no threat to the community, and that works. It takes a lot of time.
But what do we do, though? We know in San Luis Obispo City there's been a lot of contention surrounding the question of homelessness. The county less so, but still hot button issues there. There's some very effective programs. Echo in Atascadero has done well. There have been some parking programs, Prado Day Center. And so there are steps being taken, but it does seem as if there's a lot of finger pointing and should we do it this way and that way, and we don't have the money, we need that.
What I've seen, and certainly the federal government saying housing first. I mean, the issue that we have is that we don't have as much housing that would be available for folks who are homeless to begin with. But what we've seen that's been most effective has been just strong case management. If you're taking people who are service resistant, sometimes, and we've seen a case recently of a woman who was on the side of the road by between Prado Day Center and our Department of Social Services for almost a year in a wheelchair, refusing any kind of assistance. Took 2 years total to finally get her into housing, and now she's I think she's now in a nursing home where she should be. She's gravely mentally ill. She has a lot of physical problems, but she's actually happy. She's well taken care of, and she's of no problem to anyone else. And it takes a lot of commitment.
But you talk about low-income housing, and for many years, cities, counties had a tool to build low-income housing, and that was through what was known as redevelopment. And some cities in this region had redevelopment agencies. Did the county?
The county did not.
And the city of SLO did not, I believe.
Correct.
And so, but for better or for worse, that tool has been eliminated. But is it time for the state to give the tool back?
I think, and certainly the governor and his folks had made a point that when they ended redevelopment, it was not, I mean, obviously there were budgetary reasons for it on their own, but they also made, defended it by saying it's not being used the way that it should have been used, which was really blighted areas and affordable housing. I think if they were to re-up the program for the cities and even counties, so that they had to spend the money on affordable housing and low-income housing, I think it would be effective. I mean, if you really restrain the funding, so that was the only thing, you couldn't spend it on bringing in a new movie theater or hiring tourism directors, but you had to spend it on, because those are the hardest things for any community in California to do, which is to get the affordable housing and low-income housing on the ground. So yeah, I think if the governor were to work to construct a program of redevelopment that made all the municipalities do that, I think that would be a big step forward.
What about the notion of using the voters to try to create redevelopment type projects, lowering the threshold to 55%, for example, instead of 67%, to pass some type of tax proposal that would allow that type of redevelopment to occur locally?
Well, I'm always supportive of things that help us to kind of lower the dysfunction that we have in the state. I mean, right now, because the legislature, is a 2/3 majority, I tend to think, though, the kind of system that works everywhere else, including at the presidential level, makes sense for everybody else, which is a majority should be the way that things get passed, with the understanding that things can flip with another majority.
Of course. And so, how do you feel as if the discussion is progressing? I know that you editorialized in the San Luis Obispo Tribune, and I read the article, and it did seem as if, look, the article was written in a very respectful way, very professional way, but you can sense the frustration you were feeling.
Yeah. Well, you have two sides of things. You have people who are quite frankly frustrated with the impacts of homelessness, and I think those concerns are legitimate. You have people who want us to do everything possible. Everybody's all God's children, and we need to let them, if they're homeless, you can't, the problem is, if you look at it from a human dignity point of view, you can't treat homeless people less than you would treat any other citizens.
Of course.
And because then you're sort of acknowledging that they're different. So I always say to the SLO PD, if you're giving tickets to Cal Poly students for peeing on somebody's lawn, then giving tickets to homeless people for doing the same thing is treating them the same.
Okay. His name is Adam Hill. He is a member of the Board of Supervisors in San Luis Obispo County. When we come back, we'll be speaking with one of his colleagues, Debbie Arnold, who is heading up the county's Homeless Services Committee. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California Edition. Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are now joined by Debbie Arnold. She is a member of the Board of Supervisors in San Luis Obispo County. And I must say congratulations. You've been on the board for 1 year now. And I wanted to look back and talk to you about that first year in office. How's it been?
It actually has been very rewarding. It's been great. It's, of course, I think any elected office is a challenge. But it's been wonderful, and the year went by so fast.
It did. And I must ask you, because you had worked with one of the Central Coast political icons, Sam Blakesley,
yes,
who coincidentally left office voluntarily when you entered office.
That's
and so how is it being the elected when you had been a key advisor for so many years for Senator Blakesley?
It's very different. And
right.
It's
is it?
Because when you are a support staff for an elected, you know, you find you're the one that's always trying to take your elected and make sure they're on time, make sure they're answering their phone calls or this, and sometimes, you know, it's hard. It's like, come back, you haven't finished yet, or we have to do. And
now you're that person.
I'm that person.
Right.
Oh, you know, there's so much. But
it was also a difficult year. San Luis lost one of its supervisors. The chair, actually, Paul Teixeira, passed away in July suddenly. Devastating loss.
Very sudden.
Loved by Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals. I mean, North County, South County.
That's true.
How was that for you as a new member?
Well, as you mentioned, he was the chairman.
Right.
And the night he passed away, we were on break.
Right.
Really, but it was the night he passed away, we together had been hosting a Latino outreach.
You had been with him that day?
That evening.
Hours before.
Yeah, and several people had. He'd worked all day.
Right.
I'd worked all day. We had crossed paths a few times, and then that evening, Latino Outreach Council actually had a forum on affordable health care as we were preparing to. So we'd worked together, said goodnight about 8:40, see you tomorrow, and got the news the next morning. So it was that sudden, that unexpected. He seemingly felt great.
How's the board doing now? There's a new member. His replacement has been named, Karen Ray. I mean, it's got to be tough to bounce back from something like that.
Well, it was so unexpected.
Right.
And I think, you know, so many people were affected by the loss. But the board is carrying on, and as you know, the governor appointed a replacement in Supervisor Ray. So it has. I think it's. Of course, it's better to have the 4th District represented again, so that was a welcome.
Of course. You have decided to take up an issue that is so critical to so many people, and that's the support of the homeless. You are chair of the Homeless Services Oversight Committee. Talk to us about those responsibilities.
And you know, it's when you are elected to the Board of Supervisors in this county, you are also assigned by the chair and your colleagues other tasks, other board positions. When I arrived last January, one of my tasks was to chair the Homeless Services Oversight Council. I actually have to tell you a year later how excited I am to have that position, and we've been working for a year. Now, it was I'm going to say it was a lucky thing for me to meet Lauren Ware, who came to work for our county social services shortly before I was elected. She had experience in Washington, D.C. as a lobbyist for homeless issues all over the country. So she has the experience of seeing programs that work, programs that don't, what makes it work, what makes it fail. And she came as support staff for the Homeless Services Oversight Council.
When we come back, I want to talk about an initiative that she brought to you. It's called 100,000 Homes. For our viewers on HLN, I want to thank you so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back on Charter California Edition. So as you mentioned, Supervisor, you do have the benefit of someone with a lot of experience in the homeless services sector. And she brought to your attention an organization called 100,000 Homes.
Correct.
Tell us about this organization.
Well, she brought a presentation to our Homeless Services Oversight Council that is made up of a lot of service organizations out there in the community.
Capslo,
they come
stuff
together,
like that.
absolutely. Different organizations that serve the homeless. We meet every other month. Well, she brought the presentation. It was something she really believed in, again, after the experience of working all over the country. And the entire committee saw the value in it. What the difference is with some of the other programs that are available out there to try to serve the homeless. And now, mind you, this committee is set up to end homelessness. It's a 10-year plan to end homelessness. We're 6 years in and really not much gain. This is a new program, but I am confident it's going to work. It's about focusing on the most severe cases, the chronically ill, and getting them off the street.
What was so interesting to me as I was reading the manifesto of this organization, this stunned me. The mortality rate for those on the streets that are homeless, that rate is on par with those suffering from cancer. The average lifespan of someone on the street is cut by 25 years.
That's right. And you can imagine as you age, the elderly, the sick and elderly, they just can't
manage.
Out in the elements, it takes its toll. Beyond that, the cost to the community, some say that it's 10% of the most chronically ill that need 90% of the financial resources. They're in the hospital.
Right. The manifesto said that the health costs for homeless those costs are surpassing the cost if you would have just built permanent housing. And so some could argue it's a good government solution to look at permanent solutions, because now we're getting to a point where healthcare is costing more than if we just work to get them into permanent housing.
And that's a lot of what's behind this particular program. It's about stabilizing these folks and then trying to provide services to them.
You have been all about making government work, streamlining government, making it most efficient and most effective. And 100,000 Homes talks about that there is a necessity, a requirement to collaborate meaningfully. There are just too many organizations, public and private, that are trying to assist the homeless with the crisis they face, but they're duplicating and triplicating and quadruplicating.
Absolutely.
And please.
I think it's time to understand that we have different demographics of homeless, if you will. We have families that have lost their job and lost their home that need the benefit of our shelters. Those shelters have to be safe. If we have drug and alcohol abusers or the mentally ill in the same, that is, in my mind, inappropriate to house, and more difficult. We're going to try to deal with the most vulnerable, the chronically ill, the mentally ill, the drug and alcohol abusers that just can't take it. So we'll do a better job of caring for our families, and we'll be able to provide the services.
What's interesting about having you as the chair is you happen to represent Atascadero. Is that right?
That's right.
And Atascadero has in its midst the Echo Homeless Service organization, which is reputed to be quite an organization.
It's a wonderful faith-based organization that has
done great work.
Done great work in the North County. And so I continue to support ECHO.
Right.
Transitional Food and Shelter in the far north, and Pastor Robles does a great job. And this program that we're trying to launch, again, will take, free up, if we're successful, it'll take the most vulnerable off the streets and help them tremendously. It'll free up a lot of the financial resources to then go help these
And so where are you going from here? I mean, you've just launched the initiative. What happens now?
We are identifying and locating permanent housing for these folks. Then we will be identifying these folks and physically finding them in the creek, behind the grocery stores, and taking them from their homeless spots into and hopefully stabilizing them in a permanent home where they can successfully be provided services and not, we're trying to find you. We don't know where you've been for 2 weeks, so you're off your meds again. That kind
so this is government doing its best to work for the people. Her name is Debbie Arnold. She is a member of the Board of Supervisors in beautiful San Luis Obispo County. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.